Growing up, I always thought something was wrong with me. Not in a dramatic attention-seeking way like my parents always accused me of, but in the quiet, creeping way that made you feel like a ghost inside your own body. It started when I was really young. I'd get dizzy out of nowhere. My heart would race after just walking up the stairs. And sometimes I'd feel like I couldn't even lift my backpack without my arms trembling. But every time I mentioned how I felt, my mom would roll her eyes and say, "You need to toughen up, Callie. You're just being dramatic again." And my dad? He'd sigh like I'd just ruined his whole day and mutter, "No daughter of mine is gonna grow up being lazy." So I stopped talking about it. I stopped telling them when I felt like I couldn't breathe. I stopped mentioning the stabbing pain in my joints or the way my vision blurred when I stood up too fast. I convinced myself I was just lazy. I was overreacting. And every time I'd push through the fatigue, I felt like I was doing what I was supposed to, proving myself, fighting the part of me that felt broken. But by the time I was in high school, it got harder to ignore. I'd come home from class and sleep for 5 hours straight. My teacher said I was bright, but inconsistent, and my friends started pulling away because I always canceled plans last minute or couldn't keep up when we walked to the mall. The worst was gym class. Everyone thought I was faking it when I said I felt dizzy during cardio. "Here she goes again." Someone would laugh. Even my gym teacher once said, "Callie, maybe if you moved a little more outside of class, this wouldn't be such a struggle." But how was I supposed to explain that my bones hurt? That I woke up every day feeling like I'd already run a marathon in my sleep? By junior year, I'd built a reputation I never asked for. The lazy girl. The drama queen. The flake. I hated it. But I hated myself even more for not being able to fight it. My parents didn't help either. If anything, they made it worse. Every time I had to miss school, my mom would bark, "There's nothing wrong with you, Callie. You're not sick. You're just addicted to attention." She even took my phone away once because she thought I was Googling symptoms to fake being ill. "Munchausen," she told my dad while standing right in front of me. "She's turning into one of those weird kids who makes up diseases for sympathy." They both laughed like it was some twisted joke. And I just stood there, frozen, humiliated, and exhausted in every sense of the word. I remember one night, sitting in my room with the lights off, just trying to breathe through a pounding headache that felt like a jackhammer against my skull. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even open the Tylenol bottle. I curled up under my blanket and whispered into the darkness, "Please, God, just tell me I'm not crazy." Because if this was all in my head like they said, I didn't know how much longer I could survive living in it. The day everything changed started like any other. I barely slept, woke up nauseous, and could hardly stand up straight without feeling like the room was spinning. But I had a big math test, and I knew if I missed it, my parents would lose their minds. So I forced myself out of bed, got dressed, and walked the half-mile to school even though my legs felt like they were made of glass. Second period, I started seeing spots. Third period, my hands went numb. By the time I reached lunch, I was gripping the edge of the table just to stay upright. I could hear my friends talking, but everything was distant, like I was underwater. Then came the ringing in my ears, the heat behind my eyes, my chest tightening like someone had wrapped a belt around it. And just as I stood up to throw away my tray, the cafeteria went black. When I opened my eyes, I was on the floor. Kids were screaming. Teachers were shouting. Someone was calling my name over and over again. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at the ceiling tiles and wonder if I'd finally gone too far, if my body had finally given out after years of pretending I was fine. Paramedics wheeled me out on a stretcher. I could see the panic in their eyes as they strapped an oxygen mask to my face. One of them whispered to another, "BP's dropping fast. This isn't dehydration. Something's not right." And for the first time in my life, someone actually believed me. In the ambulance, everything was a blur. The flashing lights, the sirens, the paramedic pressing down on my wrist, counting my pulse with a look that scared me more than anything. At the They ran test after test. Blood work, EKGs, scans. I was so used to doctors brushing me off, I expected them to send me home with a juice box and a lecture about anxiety. But this time was different. A young doctor walked into the room holding a clipboard and sat down beside me. His face was calm, but serious. "Callie," he said gently, "has anyone in your family ever talked to you about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome?" I blinked. "What? What's that?" He explained. "A rare genetic connective tissue disorder. One that could cause everything I'd been feeling for years: chronic fatigue, joint pain, dizziness, heart issues. It wasn't in my head. It was in my DNA. I think you may have a subtype of it," he said, "but we'll need to do genetic testing to be sure." My entire body went cold. A part of me felt relief, like someone had finally switched the light on in a room I'd been trapped in for years. But another part of me was filled with something deeper: rage. Because this wasn't the first time someone had mentioned that word, Ehlers-Danlos. I remembered hearing it once when I was 8. I'd woken up screaming from pain in my knees, and my mom had taken me to a pediatrician. He'd asked her if there was any family history of connective tissue disorders. She'd said no. Lied, flat out lied. And now, lying there in that hospital bed, everything started to connect. My mom's constant migraines. My dad's bad knees. The stories I'd overheard about an aunt who was always in and out of the hospital. They knew. They knew, and they never told me. The doctor placed a gentle hand on my arm. "You're not crazy, Callie. And you're not lazy. This is real. And I promise, we're going to get you the help you deserve." I turned away as tears streamed down my face, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that the people I had trusted the most had hidden the truth from me my entire life. And I had no idea why. The next morning, my hospital room smelled like bleach and sadness. A plastic band hugged my wrist, monitors beeped quietly beside me, and my phone buzzed every few minutes with texts from classmates who never even said hi in the hallway before. Funny how fast people cared when you collapsed in the middle of lunch. But my parents hadn't come. Not when I was rushed to the ER. Not when the doctor said I might have a serious genetic condition. Not even the next morning when I opened my eyes and realized I was still alone. When the nurse came in to check my vitals, I asked softly, "Did my parents call?" She glanced at my chart and gave me a small, awkward smile. "They said they're on their way. Probably traffic." Traffic. Right. They lived 15 minutes away. The truth was, I already knew why they hadn't come. It was the same reason they never believed me, never listened, never asked questions. Because if they came to the hospital and sat in front of that doctor, they'd have to admit it, that I wasn't dramatic, that I wasn't lazy, that I had been sick the entire time, and they knew it. When they finally walked in just after noon, I didn't even say anything. I just stared at them, my mom in her neat sweater set, carrying her emotional detachment like a purse. My dad in his work shirt, eyes already darting toward the machines like they were inconveniencing him. "Callie," Mom said with this bright, forced cheeriness, "you look fine." I told them it was probably just dehydration. That school lunch is garbage. I didn't even blink. The doctor thinks I have Ehlers-Danlos. The second I said it, I saw something flicker across her face. Not confusion. Not shock. Recognition. My dad cleared his throat. "I mean, that's a pretty rare thing, right? Let's not jump to conclusions. You've always been a little sensitive." I sat up straighter, my voice flat. The doctor ordered genetic testing. He said the symptoms matched perfectly. He asked if there was family history. Silence. I stared at them, heart thumping. "So, is there?" They didn't answer. Just shifted awkwardly, like they were trying to silently decide who should lie first. "Mom," I said again, "is there any history of this in our family?" Her lips tightened. She looked away. "Your Aunt Lindsay had something like that, I think." She was always in and out of hospitals when we were kids. Hypermobile joints, constant migraines. But we never really talked about it. Did she get diagnosed? I don't remember. Did you get tested? She looked at me then, dead in the eye, and said, "There was no point." My voice rose. "What do you mean, no point? You knew this ran in the family and didn't even think to warn me?" "You're being hysterical," my dad said quickly. "It's not like you were dying." I could barely breathe. I fainted. At school. In front of everyone. I could have died, Dad. Mom's face hardened. "Don't you dare twist this into us trying to hurt you. We didn't want you growing up thinking you were broken." My mouth dropped open. "So instead, you let me think I was lazy. That I was crazy. That I was making everything up. Because if we let you believe you were sick," she snapped, "you'd never push yourself. You'd use it." And there it was. The real reason. The ugly, unforgivable truth. They weren't protecting me. They were controlling me. They were so terrified of having a damaged daughter that they'd rather gaslight me for 16 years than risk having me know the truth. And in doing so, they broke something in me I wasn't sure could ever be fixed. I turned away from them, blinking back tears. "You don't get to pretend you did this out of love. You let me suffer. For years. That's not parenting. That's abuse." Neither of them said a word. Just stood there in the heavy silence, like strangers in my hospital room. When the doctor came in later to explain the next steps, referrals to specialists, managing symptoms, physical therapy, I asked if I could speak to him alone. Because from that moment forward, I knew I had to draw a line. My parents might have brought me into this world, but they didn't get to break me in it anymore. After my parents left the hospital without saying goodbye, something inside me shifted. I had spent my whole life trusting their version of reality, letting them shape my story. Every time they told me I was fine or just being dramatic, I swallowed it like medicine I didn't want to take, bitter, painful, and always leaving a part of me feeling emptier than before. But now I knew they had lied. And not just once. Repeatedly. Over years. On purpose. They let me believe I was crazy rather than face the truth themselves. So when I got home from the hospital 2 days later, with a wrist brace on one arm, a long list of upcoming appointments, and more questions than I'd ever had in my life, I knew what I had to do. I needed answers. Real ones. Not the gaslighting fairy tales I grew up hearing. The day I returned home, the house felt colder. Like the air itself had changed somehow. Mom didn't hug me. Dad didn't ask how I was feeling. It was as if we'd all silently agreed to pretend nothing had happened. But I wasn't pretending anymore. That night, when they went to bed, I crept up to the attic. There was a box I'd seen a few times growing up, dusty, covered in old tape, labeled Lindsay. My mom's sister. The one who was always sick, but no one ever talked about. I opened it slowly, hands trembling. Inside were piles of hospital records, old prescriptions, photos of a pale girl in hospital gowns, curled up in beds, 4 tubes in her arms. There were letters, so many letters, written by Lindsay in shaky handwriting. Some were addressed to my mom, others to doctors. One note, tucked inside a manila envelope, caught my eye. "Dear Jennifer, that's my mom. I finally got the diagnosis, EDS, hypermobile type. It explains everything. I'm scared, but I'm relieved too. At least I'm not imagining it. Please don't ignore this. If it's genetic, you might have it too. And if you ever have kids, they need to know." I read that line 5 times. If you ever have kids, they need to know. My chest tightened. She knew. My mom knew. Even back then. And she ignored it. Not only that, she hid it. There were medical summaries from genetic specialists and multiple references to chronic fatigue, dislocations, dysautonomia, every single symptom I'd been dealing with for years. It was all there. My mom had a front row seat to what this disease looked like, and still she'd chosen to bury it in a box in the attic instead of telling me the truth. When I finally came downstairs, it was close to 3 a.m. I sat at the kitchen table with the folder clutched in my arms and waited for morning. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just waited. At 6:30 a.m., when my mom came downstairs in her robe to make coffee, she stopped dead in her tracks when she saw me and the folder. She didn't say anything at first. So I did. "You knew," I said quietly. "Your sister warned you. And you still didn't tell me." Her face paled. "Callie, it's not that simple." "It is." I cut in. "You didn't want to believe it. You didn't want a daughter who was sick. So you decided to pretend I wasn't. And now I've spent 16 years thinking I was lazy or broken because you couldn't handle the truth." She looked away, gripping the countertop. "I didn't want you to become like her." "What does that even mean?" "She let the illness define her. She gave up. She couldn't keep a job, couldn't have a normal life. I didn't want that for you. So instead, you made me hate myself." Her voice cracked, just a little. "You don't understand what it's like, watching someone you love disappear into their diagnosis. I was scared for you." I stood up, still holding the letter. "No. You were scared of me, of what it would mean if I wasn't perfect." And with that, I left. I walked out the front door in my pajamas and socks, sat down on the front steps, and called my Aunt Lindsay. I hadn't spoken to her in years. My mom had basically cut her off. Says she was too much drama. But when she answered and I said, "It's Callie," her voice went quiet. "I was wondering when you'd find me." We talked for over an hour. She told me everything. How she'd been diagnosed at 19 after years of being told it was all in her head. How my mom had refused to get tested. How she tried to keep a relationship but was pushed out slowly over time. And then she said something I'll never forget. "Callie, you are not broken. You're just different. And that's not a flaw. It's a reality. But you don't have to hide it the way your mother did." I felt the weight of that truth settle into my bones. It wasn't just about the disorder anymore. It was about reclaiming my story. Because if my mom spent her whole life pretending this part of her didn't exist, I was going to do the opposite. I was going to learn everything I could about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I was going to meet doctors who believed me. I was going to stop apologizing for being in pain. And more than anything, I was going to stop being quiet. After that call with Aunt Lindsay, I started keeping a journal, not just to vent, but to track my symptoms, my appointments, and my emotions. I needed to see, on paper, that I wasn't making things up. That my body was fighting battles my parents had refused to acknowledge. Every entry felt like stitching up a tear in a page someone else had ripped out of my life. School was weird when I came back. Everyone knew what happened. People stared, whispered, even offered help, some out of guilt, others out of curiosity. My math teacher asked if I needed extra time. My gym class was switched to a modified pay plan. It was like the whole school finally saw me, but no one knew what to do about it. Except for one person, Maya. She sat behind me in English, quiet, observant, always drawing little cartoons in the margins of her notebook. I'd never really talked to her before, but 2 days after I came back, she stopped me after class. "I saw the wrist brace," she said softly. "And the way you hold your shoulder sometimes. Does it pop out?" I blinked. Yeah. A lot actually." She nodded slowly. "Same. I have EDS. Diagnosed last year." It felt like someone had punched me in the chest, in a good way. Like the air had finally been knocked back into me. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't alone. There was someone else in my school who got it. We sat in the hallway for almost an hour after that, comparing symptoms, doctors, stories. She told me about a local support group for teens with chronic illness and even shared a list of EDS-aware physical therapists. "I know it's scary," she said as we stood to leave. "But once you start meeting people who believe you, it gets better. You stop thinking you're broken. You start thinking you're brave." Brave. That word stuck with me. Not lazy. Not dramatic. Not attention-seeking. brave. Over the next few weeks, I started building a new version of my life. Not the one my parents had written for me, but one where I got to decide who I was and what I needed. I filed for accommodations at school. I joined that teen chronic illness support group. I even posted a TikTok one night, a shaky, teary-eyed clip talking about how I was gaslit by my parents for years and only found out I had a rare genetic disorder after collapsing in public. I didn't expect much from it, but within 24 hours, it had over 300,000 views. And the comments? They were full of people, some young, some older, sharing the same story. My mom said I was just lazy too. I got diagnosed at 22 after being told I was just anxious my whole life. You are so strong for telling your truth. Please don't stop. Something cracked open in me that night. Something bigger than anger, bigger than grief. Purpose. I didn't want anyone else to feel as alone as I had. So I kept posting. I talked about doctors. I talked about gaslighting. I talked about pain and fatigue and the emotional weight of being doubted by the people who were supposed to protect you. And slowly, something beautiful started happening. People started messaging me. They asked for advice. They told me I helped them get diagnosed. Some even said they showed my videos to their families and were finally believed. One girl DM'd me from another state, saying, "Your story saved me." I thought I was going crazy. But now I know I'm not alone. Every time I read a message like that, it made all the pain feel like it had a purpose. My parents, of course, hated the videos. "You're airing our dirty laundry." My mom snapped one night. "What if your future employers see this?" But I wasn't afraid anymore. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I'm not ashamed of being sick. I'm ashamed of how you treated me when I was." And for once, she didn't have a response. I didn't make the videos to hurt her. I didn't even do it for revenge. I did it because somewhere out there was another kid lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if they were just lazy too. I wanted them to hear the truth before it was too late. That their pain was real. That they weren't crazy. That they deserved to be believed. Eventually, my aunt flew out to visit. She hugged me like someone who'd been waiting her whole life to give that kind of hug. She brought her own journals, and we sat in the park reading through entries that mirrored my own symptoms, confusion, heartbreak. "I used to think I was cursed," she said quietly. "But now, watching you, I think maybe we're just wired to survive harder battles." And that hit me hard. Because it was true. I hadn't been given an easy path, but I had walked it anyway. Crawled sometimes. Fell. Collapsed. But I always got back up. And now I wasn't walking it alone. By the end of the school year, I wasn't the same girl who had collapsed in the cafeteria 6 months earlier. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't someone who swallowed her pain or questioned her reality just because the people who raised her didn't want to face it. I had learned to live with my diagnosis, but more than that, I had learned to live in truth. I wish I could say my parents changed. That they apologized, that we cried it out, and they finally saw me for who I really was. But life doesn't always give you tidy endings. Sometimes, it just gives you clarity. They stayed the same. Sure, they started attending a few doctor appointments to save face. My mom even read an article about Ehlers-Danlos and acted like she was always supportive. But I knew better. Their version of love came with conditions. With silence. With shame. And I didn't want it anymore. Not like that. So I started setting boundaries. I stopped trying to earn their approval. I stopped hiding who I was. When college acceptance letters started coming in, I only applied to schools out of state. It wasn't just about getting away, it was about building something of my own. Something honest. Something free. The day I got into Emerson University with a full scholarship for creative writing, I didn't even wait to tell them. I just celebrated with Maya, my support group, and my aunt, who baked me a cake with "No More Secrets" written across the top and frosting. Because this was my victory. Not just for getting into college, but for surviving something most people never even realize they're enduring, emotional gaslighting from the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. The week before I moved, I filmed one final video. No dramatic music. No crying. Just me, sitting on my bedroom floor with the folder of medical records beside me. I looked into the camera and said, to anyone who was told they were lazy or dramatic or just making it up, this is for you. You are not weak. You are not crazy. You are not alone. I lost so much time believing I was the problem, but now I know the truth. I was never broken. I was brave. And so are you. That video went viral overnight. Not because it was flashy, but because it was real. Comments flooded in from people all over the world, sharing stories eerily similar to mine. Some had been misdiagnosed for decades. Others were just starting their journey. And a lot of them were kids, like me, who'd grown up thinking their pain was a character flaw instead of a symptom. That's when I realized something powerful. My story wasn't rare. It was just rarely talked about. That silence? That's what breaks people. That's what convinces them they're crazy. And I wasn't going to be part of that silence anymore. I started writing a book about my experience, half memoir, half survival guide for chronically ill teens trying to navigate a world that tells them to suck it up. Maya designed the cover. Aunt Lindsay helped edit the medical chapters. I called it The Truth About Lazy Girls. When I left for college, I packed light, just my journals, my laptop, my heating pads, and my spine brace. But emotionally, I carried something much heavier. Grief for the years I lost. Anger for the love I deserved but never got. But also, pride. Because I fought back. And I won. College wasn't easy. Chronic illness doesn't magically go away because you change your zip code. There were still flare-ups, days I couldn't get out of bed, nights I cried from pain no one could see. But now I had words. I had community. I had a name for the thing I'd been fighting all along. And even more importantly, I had myself. Fully. For the first time. Senior year of college, I was invited to speak at a national chronic illness conference. Me, a girl who used to fake being okay just to survive gym class. I stood on that stage, breathing slowly to manage my dysautonomia, and told a room full of people that they weren't invisible. That their pain mattered. That their truth mattered. After the speech, a mom came up to me with tears in her eyes and said, because of you, I'm going to listen to my daughter differently now. That moment, that was worth everything. Years later, I finally had the strength to go back and visit home. Not to stay. Not to forgive. But to understand. My parents were older. Still cold. Still distant. My mom barely acknowledged my book when I left a signed copy on the kitchen table. But I didn't need her to be proud of me. I was already proud of myself. Before I left, I walked up to my childhood bedroom, now a dusty guest room, and pulled out the same journal I used to write in when I thought no one believed me. I flipped to the very first page. In tiny, scared handwriting, it said, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I wish someone would help me figure it out. I smiled. Because that someone had turned out to be me.